Hi everyone, so today we're starting a new unit on statistics and probability, which is actually one of my favorite topics in math. So today we're going to start with describing data in stem and leaf plots. So we have a few different ways we can describe data. The first one is a mean, which is the average of a set of numbers. And the way you find that is you add up the total and you divide by the number of numbers that you have. The next is the median. So the median is the middle number in a set of numbers. So this happens when maybe we have 5 and we kind of count them off and cross them off, and then here's our median or our middle number. Next we have mode, which is the number that occurs most often. And you've probably heard this trick before, but remember the first 2 letters of mode are MO, so stand for most often. And you can also have multiple modes. So what that means is maybe in a set of data, one mode is 50 because that happens 10 times, and you also have 75 because that also happens 10 times. Next up is maximum, which you can probably figure out just by looking at it, is just the greatest value that you have. And then of course our minimum is the smallest value. And our range is the max minus the min. So to find the range, you just subtract. And now we might get into a few more terms that are a little bit more unfamiliar. So if we have something called the interquartile range, or we just abbreviate that as IQR pretty much, that is going to be Q3 minus Q1. So you might be like, what are those? So Q3 stands for quartile 3, and Q1 stands for, you guessed it, quartile 1. So what are those? Q1 is the median of the lower half of data, and Q3 is the median of the upper half of data. Which means that the median is actually kind of like our Q2. So what we're going to do is describe this data set. So we have the summary statistics for the number of points a football team scores in each game during the last 2 years. The first thing that you want to do is put your data in order. It's going to make it a lot easier. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for you. It really helps to cross things off as you write them. But I have this written out, so I'm just going to zoom through this. So now that our data is in order, we can figure out all of these summary statistics. So the first one that we can figure out is the mean. So to find the mean, I would add up every single number that I saw there. And when I add them up, for the sake of time, that is 321. And I divide by the total number. So there are 20 different scores here, so divide by 20. When I do that, my mean turns out to be 16.05. So that means on average, this team scored about 16 points. Next up is my median. So for my median, what I'm going to do is start at the bottom, cross off one at the top. Next, one at the top. Next, one at the top. Next, one at the top. And I keep going And now notice I end up with two numbers here. So if you end up with two numbers in the middle, what you have to do is find the median between them. So our median, again, is kind of like our Q2. What I would do to find them is find the average between 14 and 17. So I'd take 14 plus 17, and I would divide by 2, and I would find out my median is 15.5. Next, I look at my data and try to figure out which number occurs most often for my mode. It's pretty obvious from this one that the score to occur most often is 17 because that happens 5 times. So our mode is 17 because that's the most often occurring point value that we see. Next, max and min are pretty easy to see. So our max is 35 and our min is 3. Our range, we take max minus min. So we do 35 minus 3, and we get 32. Now here's our next ones that are a little bit trickier. So our Q1. What I'm going to do now is look at the first half of my data. So I'm going to look at this half for Q1. So now let's take out a purple. And what I'm going to do is try to find out the median of these. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to cross off here. Now I'm going to cross off this 14 at the top. Then I do 3 and 14, 7 and 14, 9 and 14. And now notice I have two numbers in the middle. Luckily, they're the same number, so my Q1 falls right here, and it is 13. Now Q3 is the median for the second half of data. So hopefully this shows up. So if I highlight the second half of data, I'm going to find out what Q3 is. So I cross off one at the bottom, one at the top, bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom, top. And now I end up with 17 and 21. So Q3 is right here, but I need to find the average of those because I have 2. So now 17 plus 21 divided by 2 gives me 19. And last up, to find the IQR, I do Q3 minus Q1, which is 19 minus 13, which is 6. So you might be wondering what the Q3 minus Q1 is doing and what the IQR is doing. What this is saying is if you look at the distance between Q1 and Q3, this is kind of like our middle half of the data. And what the IQR is telling us is how far apart is this middle half. So you kind of expect this middle half to almost be like an average in a way. So it ranges from about 13 to 19. Half of all scores are in that range. And that range is only about 6 points apart. So depending on what this is, maybe there's a football team that scores all over the place. They're either really good or really bad. And their middle half of data is from like 2 points, I don't even know if that's possible, to like 100. So some days they're really on it, some days they're not. And then their IQR is 98. Well, this team is more consistent because their IQR, their middle half of data is only 6 points away from each other. So next up, we're going to go with stem and leaf plots. So this is one way that we can display our data, where we split it into, you guessed it, a stem, which is the first digit, and a leaf, which is the second digit. So if I see the number 32, the 3 goes in the stem part, and the 2 goes in the leaf part. So let's just practice making a stem and leaf plot and then describing the data. So the first thing that I like to do is make one off to the side that has them not in order. So I kind of just do it as I see them. I know I'm working with 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, so my stems are 6, 7, 8, and 9. Then if I see my first number is like 90, I'll just put a 0 here because then this means 90. My second number is 95, so I'll put a 5 here. So this means 95. Here, 72, I'll put a 2 here. 85, put a 5. 89, I'll put a 9. So notice this doesn't mean 859. it means 85 and 89. 70, I'll put a 0. 99, I'll put a 9. 67, 79, 82, 87, 89, 93, 95, 78, and 89. And now, finally, I'm going to set up my stem and leaf plot so that these numbers are in order. So it was easiest for me to organize my data like that and then just put a few numbers in order versus trying to get them all in order at the same time. So here I have my stem and my leaf, and I kind of like to write them so everything's lined up. So remember, I have 6, 7, 8, 9. Then I have the number 67. Now I'm going to put these 4 numbers in order. So I'm going to write 0, 2, 8, 9. Then for the 80s row, I'm going to write 2, 5, 7, and then there's 3 89s. And last up is my 90s row. So I write 0, 3, 5, 5, and 9. So rather than displaying things in a table, I can display things as this stem and leaf plot. And now I'm going to find the different values. So first off, mean, I'm going to add them all up. So I'm not just going to say, oh, well, 6 plus 0 plus 2 plus 8, right? Those aren't what those numbers means. It's really 67 plus 70 plus 72, right? So if I add those all up, I get 1,359, and I divide by the number. In this case, there are 16. So my mean score on this last quiz was an 84.93. Next up is median. So for median, I'm going to start at the top and then go to the top of the data. So 7, 9, 0, 5, and I'm going to cross them off like this. So notice I start at the bottom and then I work my way around. Now I end up with 2 numbers here. So this number right here is going to be our median. So if I think about what's halfway between 87 and 89, I don't even have to really do the math out if I can just reason that that's 88. Next up, I look for mode. Which number occurs most often? So it's a little easy for me to see. I've got these 9s in the same row. They all represent the same number, which is not 9, it is 89. And my maximum is this number way at the top, which is 99. My minimum is the number at the bottom, or really at the top of the chart, I guess, which is 67. My range, I take my max minus min, so 99 minus 67, and I end up with 32. And now I have to find Q1 and Q3. So it might be helpful for you to highlight the lower half of the data for Q1. So I cross off 1, then here, and now I end up with 2 numbers again. So this is Q1, which is halfway between 78 and 79, which you can either find the average or just reason out yourself and know that that's 78.5. Next up, we're going to find the Q3, so I'm going to highlight my second half of the data. And I'm going to try to figure out what Q3 is. So I'm going to start at the bottom, the lowest number, cross up the highest number, lowest, highest, lowest, highest. And I end up with 2 numbers here, so I know my Q3 is right in between. So it's right in between 90 and 93, which if I divide those up and divide by 2, 91.5. So my IQR is Q3 minus Q1, which is 91.5 minus 78.5, which gives me 13. So that means the middle half of the data between Q1 and Q3 are only 13 points away. So this quiz, the scores were pretty close on. And so that's what we're going to find out later about what more we can tell about IQR.